the two speakers in this session will show you that agile transformations don't work just at the small team level. They work also in big organizations and across countries, across markets. Deb Mukherjee, on my right, is a senior leader at Baringa, and with over 20 years of experience across markets in Europe, UK, and the US, he has seen lots of that, and I'm sure he can share quite some insights and practical solutions. And Nikolay on my left is as well a globally minded practitioner, one of the main characters in applying the Spotify model in a bank. So imagine that challenge. So a round of applause for both of them, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Theodora. Good afternoon, everybody. Have you had good lunch? Very good. Have you got a very good lunch? Okay, that makes it more challenging for me because I need to make sure the session doesn't put you off to sleep, right? So before we talk about how we can make organizations agile, can I request all of you to stand up? Oh, you already did yoga. Okay, amazing. So amazing. So I think we can just test your agility from the yoga session, right? So hands up on your sides, just a bit of a flex, okay? Left leg up, bit of a flex, right leg up, bit of a flex, okay? All right, have a seat. Thank you. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Hopefully that has just erased some of the sort of doziness that comes from having a really good lunch. So we are from Baringa, as Theodora introduced. For those of you who don't know, Baringa is a global consultancy with 2,000. We have got over 2,000 people operating across 8 countries. Business agility is one of our core offerings in various markets. And what we have seen over the last decade or so is organizations, while they're really good at what we call as doing agile, so that's all the stuff that we can find in the Scrum handbook, in Kanban, or in any of the agile frameworks like SAFe or anything else, they really struggle, and the struggle has been increasing in the recent years when they are trying to apply some of the promise of those frameworks at an organization level, and especially when they're dealing with uncertainties that's being brought over from the technology side with new technologies like AI coming to the market, and also from the market side where the customers are always expecting something slightly different because there is a competitor who is offering something slightly different to them. So what we're going to talk about today, you guys are all Agile experts. If not, you have now become Agile experts attending all the sessions in the morning. So we're not going to tell you how to do Scrum well and all of that. What we're going to talk about today and what you can take away after the session today are a set of lessons that we have learned, sometimes the hard way, working with clients who are good at the framework stuff, but they're struggling to apply some of that framework goodness across the organization. So what are the 4 or 5 things that you can take away and apply at an organization level to help organizations deal with uncertainties and get more value from Agile? So before we go any further, as Theodora introduced, here's Nick. Nick leads the agility practice in the Sofia office. So if you want to grab him after the session today or anytime later, he's very fluent in Bulgarian and English. I am not that fluent in Bulgarian, not at all. And he'll be more than happy to talk you through some of our experiences and exciting work we're doing. And before you doubt, this is not our uniform, right? We just happened to find out that we are wearing the same jumper and kind of look like we're coordinating. This is not the Baringa uniform.
It's good that you clarified. Because I was really
no, we were getting there. That was a strange confusion in the morning about the wardrobe. This is Deb. He's our global leader for the Agile practice. His Bulgarian is getting better, but if it comes down to leading the transformation and helping you guys at your office, he might struggle a bit. So we're coming in pair in terms of translator, translatee when it comes down to that part. And he'll walk us through an interesting client story that we picked up out of the numerous we have in order to share and bring you to life. What does it mean to struggle in those kind of situations?
Thank you. So before I entered the story, I wanted to start with almost this observation or thought. So most of the big organizations that we work with, big banks, big energy companies, big telco companies, and definitely the government organizations, they are all kind of designed to play safe. They're all designed to keep things running the way they're running. They've got brilliant PMOs and brilliant governance structures who capture all the risks, and then they report all the risks and tell everybody not to take risks, right? So those organizations are very hardwired to behave and operate in a certain way. And what we have observed is as organizations scale up, they tend to become like this because they tend to kind of bring the average down into a sort of a common mediocrity of being quite in a low risk and very very happy to stay where they are and just run things as they go. So that's just the background of this, and you'll see why I shared that background. So I'm going to tell you the story of one of our clients in the UK. This client is a very innovative insurer in the UK. The insurance market, as you may know, in the UK is very old. Some of the first insurance ever written in the world were written in UK. So this client came in the market with as a startup, and they now operate across 8 countries, 8,000 people, and they started winning in the market using real innovative product features. So they started combining car insurance with home insurance, creating like a full customer risk profile. And then they added pet to it, added travel to it, and all of that. They came up with app-based quotes for the first time in the UK market. So they were really on the sort of the innovative end of the market, and they were using technology in a smart way to do all of that. And guess what? Their teams, their IT teams, actually adopted Agile. They have been doing Scrum for the last 10 years. They were really good at it. They knew all the ins and outs of how to do stand-ups well, how to do retrospectives well. They were proficient in using Jira and all the tools. So they were really, really good at it. What started happening is as they started growing, they started facing some of the problems. Some of the problems that come from the thought I shared right at the start. So what were the problems? They started getting into this siloed structure mentality. So a classic example was in the area of pricing. So there were a bunch of pricing people who wanted to come up with the best pricing model. And anyone, if you have bought insurance, you would know the pricing model works on a variety of factors. So what car you've got, what's your age, whether you're married, whether you've got kids, blah, blah, blah. So they wanted to come up with the best pricing model that would help them win in the market, get the winning business in the market. Then they had a bunch of people who are running the app, the front-end team. Their main goal was to improve customer experience. So the pricing guys are saying, we need to capture these 3 additional data fields. And these guys are saying, no, actually, we want to capture less data fields because we want to provide a better customer experience. Then you had the call center guys. They were saying, no, by releasing a new pricing model in the market, we're going to get more calls and we don't have people to handle calls. Our call time will go up, et cetera, et cetera. And then you had the back-end guys right at the end who are going, right, okay, we just want to maintain as is. Anything you change, everything will break. And, we'll have more service tickets to service. So we just want everything to remain as is. So what you suddenly had as they grew was this siloed structure, right? So everybody kind of had their own agendas. They had what I would call as more bureaucracy in decision making, because you can't make any decisions here because these guys are saying, I want to do this. The front end guys are saying, no, I can't handle that, so therefore you can't do that. And then the call center guys are saying, no, both of you are wrong, we can't do any of this. And so you ended up in a situation where there was like almost endless loops of decision making. And the decisions they ended up making are just obvious decisions, are just very low risk, very mediocre decisions that they would anyways make, that kind of didn't need a lot of discussion to be made anyways. And any of the bold decisions, because nobody wanted to take any risk, never got made, because they were kind of, you can't do that because something will break here. You can't do this because something will break in my world. And therefore, they were kind of stuck in this world where there was just no room for making any new experiments, right? Because you only move forward, or you only can innovate when you are taking risk, and you can allow for a possibility that the experiment or the risk you are taking may not work out, right? But because of this sort of scaled growth and the siloed structure and the decision making, they had essentially killed any room for experiments. And what that led to was slow speed of change. So they were actually not being able to release new features or release new changes to the market. And whatever they released costed them more, took them more effort and time to do it because of all of these factors. I'm going to take a pause here. Has anyone seen that? Excellent. Very good. Good. So what was going wrong here, right? Because they were really good in doing Agile. They could be sort of the best speakers in this conference, and they can run a session on how to do Agile very well. So what was going wrong, and some of the things we tried to change and were successful in changing, I'm going to talk about those things now, and then Nick is going to say the lessons learned from them. So the first thing we did was to break this siloed structure. So we said there's no IT team and then a non-IT team and pricing team and this team and that team. Everybody who is working on pricing needs to form one team. And doesn't matter what you call that team Apple or Banana or whatever, but you are the guys, you have the pricing ability, you have got the front end ability, you've got the back end ability, you've got the call center guys in there. You guys need to make sure that our quotes are more competitive than anybody else's. Right? The second thing we did was we set that team one purpose. As I said, so your purpose is to get the best quotes out in the market and make sure we win in the market. That's the start and end of it all. And then the third thing we did is we made sure that the team had empowerment to make the decision. So they could decide what to release, when to release, what to stop. They could decide to hire different skills. They could decide to upskill. They could decide to play different roles. So the front-end developers can come up with better suggestions, saying to the pricing guy, saying, you wanted these 3 data fields. We're not capturing those 3, but we're capturing that, and you can use that. So we made that happen. And what that immediately did was that broke down the silos. So there was no more, it was, I want to do this and you want to do that and that team wants to do that. They all wanted to do one thing. And that thing was embedded in the organizational purpose, which is we want to grow our profits, we want to grow our revenue, and we want to do that by getting more winning quotes through the door. And what that immediately did was created this culture of test and learn, because effectively now this bunch of people are going, guys, what are we going to do? Let's try this idea, right? Because if we don't all succeed together, then we all fail, right? So let's try this idea. And okay, if we fail, we're going to come back and try again, try a different idea. And that ended up in creating 3 times faster releases. So they could release change that they were taking 6 months to release in 2 months. And they could do that with 25% less effort. Nick, do you want to talk through how the key takeaways in that space?
So these are the 5 key takeaways that we managed to quintessentially make an essence out from all these clients. The first and foremost is that you need to stop using terminology such as business and IT. and HR and risk. The new atomic unit that organizations need to consider are the multidisciplinary teams that are comprised around the value and deliver a specific value that you target them to do so. The second bit is that no matter what framework you use, and hopefully it's going, what framework you're using, that's not the end goal. I know it sounds very logical and you've heard it 10,000 times, but you're not supposed to be agile for the sake of being agile. You're aiming at a business outcome. You're aiming to become a better workplace for the talents in Bulgaria or elsewhere. Otherwise, if you're aiming to deliver the framework for the sake of it, you ultimately fail. The third bit is that at the end of the day, and you probably heard it throughout the conference today, this is a people shift. It's not so much in the process, but it's the people shift that requires time to unlearn habits and make new ones shaped in your workforce. That means that you don't just do a Lego workshop and suddenly everyone can do Agile and stand up. And your leaders completely transform and suddenly they will be the best servant leaders ever. Lego workshop is the first step of 1,000 shapes and journeys that you need to create. And anyone who tells you that one workshop can make it is a liar. The fourth bit, which comes very, very close with the third one, is the leaders are the role models of the transformation. The new ways of working, behaviors, habits, decisions. How this can look like, it can be your board member flipping burgers on the summer party instead of someone else having a VIP session. It means that they might decide to, they should not get a personal secretary anymore, but have a pool. It might mean that you kill the entirety of the offices and have an open space where the entirety of the senior manager sits on a bench. These are some of the examples they should consider a role model as a simple thing. Instead of asking for status reports, do a Gamble walk. And if they don't know what Gamble walks is, teach them. And last but not least, which is for me the most important one, is if you want to achieve the impact you aim to do holistically as the totality organization and not just in bits of the teams, this needs to be a systematic transformation that captures all the elements. And if you wonder which are those elements, we try to capture them in the next visual. They're all coming together because they're connected and you can't just do one and expect the whole system to work. The first bit is the purpose. This is the why of why you're transforming into a certain direction and why you're taking it. The purpose of the transformation or change needs to be very closely linked to the overall organizational focus. The second bit is the leadership and culture. It's the essence and the DNA that you need to transform to turn leaders into servant leaders, and in order to create an environment of experimentation, trust, and empowerment. The third bit is your skills and talent. You can't just make a new organization, use the same old professions and career tracks, the same old roles, and expect things to move differently. You need to also not only change the roles, but reshape your remuneration system in order to support the change in the behaviors and the culture you want to go for. The fourth bit is the organization and structure, which Deb leaned earlier into, is dissolving the organization and creating the new atomic units that are the multidisciplinary team in order to drive the value that you want to achieve. Fifth is the ways of working, and this is the element of iterative delivery and experimentation and making sure release value as quickly as possible. And last but not least is the governance and funding. Now this sounds complicated, but for me, one of the biggest myths is that you're only supposed to deliver value iteratively, which is a big mistake. You're supposed to take decisions also iteratively. Have a drumbeat of deciding, making decisions, reprioritizing to make sure that you invest in the right priorities, and you can clearly outline a golden thread from each individual and team purpose all the way up to your organizational purpose. That being said, we're not going to leave you with a lot of answers. We're going to leave you with two questions. The first one is, what are you optimizing for? So ask that question to you or your leaders when it comes down to the point of we need to change. And the second bit is, what are you willing to give up? Because Agile brings a lot of new elements. It can seem like a lose of control, but in essence, it's creating a whole lot of transparency. If your organizations are struggling or having challenges with any of these elements, or you're actually keen to explore and solve some of these challenges with other companies, please feel free to talk to us. We are ahead of time, so if there are any questions, you can pop it up. Otherwise, you can always approach us in the coffee breaks. Yes, the question.
I can print it over and you can use this one.
I would love to know how did you make it possible that people didn't use these terms of business and IT anymore, especially in big corporations where you have it a little bit separated and mostly the IT department is somehow like a service provider still in the feeling, and even if they change to a agile way of working, have you examples for this, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, really great question. So I've kind of got two-part answer to it. So the first part answer is actually creating a new organizational unit which has a different name. I obviously threw in names of apples and bananas. We didn't do that. But in the instance that I was talking about, we essentially created a concept called tribe, which comes from the Spotify model. So we created a quotes and new business tribe, and the whole concept of tribe probably took about 6 months of, as Nick was touching on, of change and comms to be embedded in people's head, that the tribe doesn't belong to business, it doesn't belong to IT, it doesn't belong to pricing anywhere. It is a sort of a organizational unit on its own, and the tribe lead essentially reports to the CEO as a new organizational unit. And we took them through a number of sort of client demos, but not necessarily all Baringa clients. Some of them were organizations who have done this similar sort of transformation, to convince them that this was a good thing to do. So the first part of the answer is that sort of you need to create a new structural identity that doesn't exist before. Because if you don't do that, and if you say, oh, it's all going to report to business, or it's all going to report to IT, or all going to report to somewhere else in the existing organization, that doesn't really work, because then people kind of then tend to go back to the legacy structures and boundaries, and gets into all sorts of legacy mindsets there. So you need to create something new that doesn't exist. And I think the second part of that answer is the bit I mentioned in the first part, which is that change engagement, which is something you have to break. And I love the example you use, which is IT as a service provider, and that's not an easy job. It took, as I said, about 6 months to break that mindset with the leaders to say, well, IT is not the service provider. They are not like your catering staff or something like that. They are essentially the core enabler or the core part of your business. So if all of them go on holiday, you can't really work. And that is the change aspect of it, which I think Nick touched on, the culture and the leadership aspect, because some of that mindset actually sits with the leaders. Because what we found, the leaders, when they started their careers, which was probably early 2000s or something, at that time, IT was a support function, because that IT wasn't what IT is today. And they have kind of got that mentality that, we're going to just come up with something and then send it to the IT guys and they're going to deliver it. So hopefully, I don't know.
There's the last bit that I wanted to add, building on top of that, is we create something usually with those companies called two-in-a-box model. So it's essentially any tribe or any team is called by a business counterpart and an IT counterpart, and decisions are taken jointly. Roadmaps are taken jointly. QBRs are written jointly by these two-in-a-box model. So any decision is trusted and taken by these two functions in parallel, and there's no one that is ultimately above the other.
Okay. We have 4.5 minutes left and 2 more questions. So let's go with that.
Thank you. It's a bit of a follow-up question on this one. Ultimately, it's about identity on a personal level, because I do recognize myself as an IT or as a business person. So how do you handle this? How do you approach exactly this part for each and every single person? Do you kind of give them a new identity to aspire to, or you somehow let them be who they are, even if they are very encumbered in being IT from 20 years ago, but you somehow work with it in a new direction? So do we strive to change identity or to give a new one for each and individual person?
Yeah, really great question. I think at an individual level, in my experience at least, we should actually double down on that identity, because what we don't want is a bunch of generalist people who kind of are not have a clear career path or a clear understanding of where they need to improve their personal skill set. What we are looking for are deep experts. So if you are even in IT, even in IT, there are probably 50 different career paths you can take, right? So we are looking for deep experts, but which is almost the the vertical expertise. But what we are encouraging, which is probably slightly different from a traditional organization, is what I would generally call as a T-shaped model. So we are looking for a slightly broader understanding of the context that person is working on, right? So you are a great Java engineer, and you should be a great Java engineer. You should look at the best engineering tools available to release code, to write code, etc. And you should be bringing that to the team. But your overall identity in the team, not your individual identity, is to support the team purpose, right? So everything you're doing from your skills perspective is for a broader purpose, which is coming from the team, but you are contributing with your skills, right? It's actually much easier from a sports perspective, right? So if you're playing football or something like that, almost every position people have slightly different set of skills, right? And they are supposed to be a good defender or a good forward or a good side. Some people can play in many positions, but they are playing for the same team and they're kind of achieving the same goal. So the individual career path is more of a specialism path in this case.
Okay. And the last question for the session, but I do encourage you to approach Deb in Bulgarian and Nick in English. Yeah? Or the other way around, the whole afternoon. So the last question.
Thank you. So a simple question, I guess, but how do you ensure alignment between the small teams? So what you said is effectively in the organization, you split it into smaller teams that are separately capable to provide a single service. If you have a large organization that provides different set of services, how do you make sure that the value that all of these teams provide is aligned to a common goal?
So for that particular alignment and then autonomy, pretty much what you're talking about is alignment and autonomy. How do you make sure they deliver the value, and then how do you make them click together? This comes to governance that we talked about in a different drumbeat than a daily or weekly, bi-weekly sprints. You go with the OKR approach. That's what we usually recommend, not to be outcome-based, but we have a different dream that apart from your annual plan, every 3 months you come together and you shuffle the thinking. And that's where the bottom-up prioritization and direction of the company meets the top-down approach, where the teams are given a task to solve a challenge to the objectives and then come up with the what. So you overall define the how on a group level or department level, and the teams come from the bottom up to decide what kind of projects, what kind of epics, what kind of story is going to be too detailed, but what epic story initiatives they write in order to meet and deliver the impact you're going for. So you do that every so often, and as in the earlier session the lady mentioned, you don't just do it once a year, once a quarter. You meet every month to check the progress and every quarter to reshuffle the priorities. I hope I answered. We can discuss later. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Perfectly in time. Applause.